The story does not begin with a crime scene or a courtroom. It begins quietly, inside filing cabinets, flight logs, sealed agreements, and routines that appeared ordinary to those who passed through them. For years, names appeared on manifests, calendars filled and emptied, accounts were settled, and doors closed without explanation. According to records, much of what later drew public attention existed in plain sight long before it was questioned. Reports suggest that Jeffrey Epstein operated within a social environment defined by wealth, access, and discretion. His residences were not hidden in remote locations, but positioned among centers of influence. Properties in Manhattan, Palm Beach, New Mexico, Paris, and a private island in the Caribbean formed a network of spaces that appeared private yet constantly connected. Documents indicate that these locations were not merely homes, but points of convergence, where individuals from politics, finance, academia, and royalty moved through shared rooms and shared silences. According to financial filings, Epstein's fortune was unusual in its opacity. Unlike public financiers or industrialists, he left behind few visible business operations. There were no large firms bearing his name, no widely documented investment vehicles, and no clear explanation for sustained wealth. Investigators later noted that much of his financial structure relied on trusts, offshore entities, and legal arrangements that reduced transparency. The absence of clear income streams did not prevent his acceptance into elite circles. In some cases, it appeared to reinforce an aura of exclusivity. Documents indicate that Epstein cultivated relationships carefully. He positioned himself as a connector, someone who could introduce people to one another, facilitate donations, or open doors that were otherwise closed. In elite environments, access itself often functions as currency. According to accounts from associates, Epstein understood this dynamic well. He listened more than he spoke, remembered details, and offered assistance without immediate explanation. Favors were not always explicit, but obligations quietly accumulated. Reports suggest that early concerns about Epstein's behavior were raised years before his name became widely known. In Florida, law enforcement records indicate that local authorities began receiving complaints involving underage girls in the early 2000s. According to police reports, these complaints shared consistent patterns. The responses, however, were slow and fragmented. Jurisdictional boundaries, resource limitations, and hesitation around a well-connected suspect contributed to delays. When the case reached prosecutors, decisions were made that would later draw intense scrutiny. According to court records, Epstein entered into a non-prosecution agreement in 2008 that shielded him from federal charges in exchange for a guilty plea to lesser state offenses. The agreement included provisions that were unusual in both scope and secrecy. Victims were not informed beforehand, and potential co-conspirators were granted immunity without public identification. At the time, these details received limited attention outside legal circles. Documents indicate that the agreement allowed Epstein to serve a short sentence with extensive work release privileges. He spent much of his time outside jail, returning to his residence daily. According to reports, this arrangement was known to some officials, but rarely questioned. The system functioned smoothly, as if designed to minimize disruption rather than seek accountability. After his release, Epstein resumed many of his previous activities. According to travel records, he continued flying on private jets, hosting guests, and maintaining contact with influential figures. His social calendar did not collapse. In some circles, it barely changed. This continuity raised questions later about how reputation operates among the powerful. Silence, it appeared, could be more protective than denial. As years passed, fragments of information surfaced and disappeared. Civil lawsuits were filed and quietly settled. Documents were sealed. Non-disclosure agreements limited what could be said publicly. According to legal analysts, such agreements are common in civil litigation, but the volume and consistency in Epstein-related cases stood out. Each settlement closed a door while leaving the larger structure intact. Reports suggest that media coverage during this period was sporadic. Some outlets pursued the story aggressively, while others hesitated. Editors faced legal pressure, potential lawsuits, and the challenge of verifying claims that were difficult to corroborate without access to sealed records. According to journalists who later spoke on the record, sources were often willing to talk only anonymously, citing fear of retaliation or reputational damage. The system surrounding Epstein did not rely on a single institution. It functioned across legal offices, financial systems, social networks, and cultural norms that prioritize discretion. According to sociologists, such systems are resilient because responsibility is distributed. No single actor appears fully accountable, and each decision can be justified as routine. Flight logs later became one of the most scrutinized artifacts. According to records, Epstein's private aircraft traveled frequently between major cities and remote destinations. Names listed as passengers sparked intense speculation. Analysts noted, however, that presence on a log does not establish context or conduct. The uncertainty surrounding these documents fueled public debate while reinforcing the sense that critical details remained out of reach. As investigative reporting intensified, attention shifted to Epstein's associates. Some acknowledged past connections while denying knowledge of wrongdoing. Others declined to comment. According to public statements, several institutions returned donations linked to Epstein, framing the decision as corrective rather than accusatory. The timing of these actions raised questions about what was known and when. Documents indicate that Epstein maintained relationships with prominent academic institutions. Donations funded research programs, conferences, and fellowships. According to university records, some of these contributions were routed through intermediaries, obscuring their origin. When this information became public, institutions initiated internal reviews. The findings were often limited by incomplete records and legal constraints. The narrative shifted dramatically in 2019, when Epstein was arrested on federal charges of sex trafficking. According to court filings, the charges reflected a broader pattern of alleged abuse than previously addressed. The arrest signaled a break from earlier reluctance, suggesting that the system's protective mechanisms were under strain. Epstein's detention introduced new tensions. Reports suggest that he was placed on suicide watch and later removed from it, under circumstances that remain disputed. According to official statements, procedural failures occurred. Cameras malfunctioned. Guards fell asleep. Each explanation addressed a specific failure while leaving the overall picture unresolved. When Epstein was found dead in his cell in August 2019, the story entered a new phase. According to medical examiners, the death was ruled a suicide. Public reaction was immediate and intense. The combination of prior leniency, renewed prosecution, and sudden death fueled widespread suspicion. Questions multiplied faster than answers. Documents indicate that Epstein's death halted criminal proceedings, but did not end legal scrutiny. Civil cases continued. Victims sought accountability through other channels. Financial records were examined. Trusts were challenged. According to court documents, disputes over Epstein's estate revealed additional layers of complexity, including beneficiaries whose identities were not immediately clear. The phrase Epstein files emerged as shorthand for a vast and fragmented archive. It referred not to a single document, but to a constellation of records, emails, contracts, logs, photographs, and testimonies. Each piece offered partial insight. None provided a complete map. According to investigators, the challenge lay not in finding documents, but in interpreting what was missing. Reports suggest that some materials remain sealed due to ongoing litigation or privacy concerns. Courts have balanced transparency against the rights of individuals not charged with crimes. This balance has been contested repeatedly. Advocates for disclosure argue that secrecy enables impunity. Opponents warn against trial by implication. The system built on silence extends beyond Epstein himself. According to analysts, it reflects broader patterns in how power operates. Wealth provides access to legal expertise. Influence shapes perception. Time erodes urgency. When these factors align, accountability becomes negotiable. Survivor testimonies, when they emerged, followed a consistent pattern. According to public statements, many described feelings of isolation and disbelief. They spoke of being dismissed, delayed, or redirected. Their accounts emphasized not only alleged abuse, but the surrounding indifference. Silence was not merely the absence of sound, but an active condition maintained by procedures and priorities. As attention shifted to institutions, questions arose about oversight and responsibility. Financial regulators examined transactions. Prosecutors reviewed past decisions. Media organizations reflected on earlier coverage. According to reports, some acknowledged failures. Others emphasized constraints. The reckoning was uneven. The story continued to evolve through document releases ordered by courts. Names appeared, often without context. Public interpretation filled the gaps. Analysts cautioned against conflating association with guilt, while acknowledging that association itself warranted scrutiny. The tension between caution and curiosity defined the discourse. According to historians, scandals of this nature often reveal more about systems than individuals. Epstein's actions, whatever their full extent, moved through structures that allowed them to persist. Each interaction passed through layers of normalization. Each silence reinforced the next. The absence of definitive closure remains central to the narrative. Epstein's death foreclosed certain lines of inquiry while amplifying others. Records exist, but interpretation remains contested. Accountability has been partial. Influence has dispersed rather than disappeared. What remains is a landscape marked by unanswered questions. According to records, decisions were made that prioritized discretion over disclosure. Those decisions were legal, procedural, and cultural. Together, they formed a system that did not require coordination to function, only compliance. As years pass, the files continue to surface in fragments. Each release renews interest and frustration. The story resists resolution because it was never designed for clarity. It was shaped by incentives that reward silence and penalize disruption. In the end, the Epstein files are less a revelation than a reflection. They show how secrecy is maintained not by a single act of concealment, but by countless small choices. According to documents, those choices were made repeatedly, across institutions and decades. The system did not announce itself. It operated quietly, efficiently, and with plausible deniability. Its architecture remains visible only in retrospect, traced through records that survive despite efforts to contain them. And so the narrative continues, suspended between what is known and what remains withheld. The silence has been punctured, but it has not collapsed. According to observers, the true measure of this story lies not in what has been revealed, but in what the system still protects. And why?